Thanks, everyone. I'd like to open tonight's council meeting. It's Monday, the 23rd of October. I'll invite Councillor Cameron to read the opening prayer.
Lord, we ask that you guide us in our decision-making, protect us and the community we serve from all that is evil, and strengthen our unity for the welfare of the city. Amen.
I'd like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as the traditional custodians of the land that we meet upon today, and pay my respects to elders past, present and future, for they hold the memories, culture, tradition and hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that contribute to our community. Thank you. I'd like to advise that this council meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this council meeting that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. Albury City accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this council meeting, and audio recording will also be made for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declarations. I've received one from Councillor Stutchbury regarding item 14.4, his actions that he will leave the chamber. Are there any other conflict of interests? Thank you. Disclosure of political donations. Mr. Zagnich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This advice is to the Council meeting regarding disclosure of political donations and requirements of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. The Act under Section 147 requires a person submitting planning applications or submissions regarding a planning application to disclose any reportable political donation and or gifts to any local councillor or employee of council. Reportable political donations of those of or above $1,000 in value. The disclosure statement forms are available on the Council's website or from the Customer Service Centre and must be lodged in accordance with the Act. The forms are also available at the back of the chamber during meetings. There are no development applications on this Council meeting agenda, so that is the end of the disclosure statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zagnich. Apologies, I've received none. Merrill Minute, there is none. That brings us... Oh, sorry. We have an apology from Councillor Mack. Thanks, Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you to move that we receive a note and accept the apology of Councillor Mack and grant leave of absence for the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Now to action plans. I need a mover, please, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Thorley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'm just waiting for it to appear. I move that the following action plans be received and noted. Those that are complete, those that are in progress, and those that are long-term issues.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Happy to second that, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thorley, would you like to speak to those items at all? Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. Councillor Cameron.
Move that the minutes of the previous meeting be adopted.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron, would you like to speak to those at all?
No, thank you.
Thank you. I have no speakers for or against. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Reports from council committees. Minutes of the extraordinary council meeting held on the 13th of October. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, to move that the minutes of the following meeting, the extraordinary council meeting held on the 13th of October 2017 at, I think might have been 6 p.m.
No, it's
12.
Midday.
Oh, yes, sorry, that's the correct, yes, midday, right.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Councillor Thorley.
I'll second the motion, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, would you like to speak to those minutes? Thank you, councillors. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. All right, reports from council committees. I need a mover, please, councillors. Councillor Cameron.
I'd like to move that the report from the Community and Cultural Committee meeting held on Monday the 16th of October 2017 6 p.m. be adopted.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron, would you like to speak to those minutes? Thank you. Councillors, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Report from community forums, I have none. Notices of motion or rescission, I have none. Presentations and deputations, I have none. That brings us to reports and minutes of committees and working parties. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you as the Chair to move the recommendation that the minutes from the Special Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee held on Wednesday the 11th of October be received, noted and accepted.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervan.
I'm happy to second that, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, would you like to speak to those minutes?
No, that will be fine. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no speakers for or against. I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Minutes of the Murray-Darling Association. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I move the minutes and recommendations of the Murray-Darling Association Region 1 meeting held on Friday, 25th of August be received, noted and accepted.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Madam Deputy Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, would you like to speak to those minutes?
Very briefly, we did have a presentation at that meeting from a member of the Wentworth Concern Group of Scientists, and he gave a very succinct report on their views and attitudes to the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, what it's achieved so far. I'm happy to recommend that councillors, if they're interested, could read the report of the Wentworth Group. It's interesting reading.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. I have no other speakers for or against. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Minutes of the Albury Airport Users Advisory Committee. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Through you to move, so we've got all of them up there now. Okay, so item C, Albury Airport Users Advisory Committee meeting held on Wednesday the 6th of September 2017. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervan.
Happy to second that, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, would you like to speak to those minutes? Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Minutes of the Local Traffic Committee meeting. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I move that the minutes recommendations of the Local Traffic Committee meeting held on Thursday, 14 September 2017 be received, noted and accepted.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Happy to second that, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey, would you like to speak to those minutes?
Very briefly, I'd like to acknowledge the amount of work that's done by the members of the committee, not only council, but the external members also. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no speakers for or against. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. And minutes of the Floodplain Risk Management Committee. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I would like to move that Council adopt the minutes and recommendations of item E, minutes of Floodplain Risk Management Committee meeting held on Thursday, 21st September 2017.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, would you like to speak to those minutes? Thank you. I have no speakers for or against. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Documents for sealing, we have none. That brings us to item 14.1, Local Government New South Wales Conference. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'd like to move that Council A confirm the attendance of the Mayor and Deputy Mayor at the Local Government New South Wales Conference from Monday the 4th to Wednesday the 6th of December 2017 in Sydney. B, determine that the two other councillors to attend the conference as council's voting delegates for voting on conference motions and board elections be Councillor Cameron and Councillor King. C, approve all registration, travel, accommodation and other reasonable expenses associated with the attendance of Council's delegates and observers at the conference.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Councillor Vandervan.
No, I'm not going to second that motion, Madam Chair.
That's right. Councillor Stutchbury, you seconder?
Madam Deputy Mayor, I will second that motion.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron, would you like to speak to that motion?
Yes, thank you. This is a procedure we go through each year to determine our delegates to the conference. Local government conference is a excellent learning and networking experience for new councillors particularly. I know that Councillor Glacken has articulated a desire to attend the conference, and she's already been approved to attend the conference by the Mayor. Councillor Glacken won't be disadvantaged, I believe. Council will meet her attendance at the conference, and she'll be free to participate in any elections should that be her desire. And my understanding is that as an executive member at the moment, she will receive her vote as an executive member in the ballot. So if we were to send Councillor Glacken again as a delegate from Albury, she would in fact be entitled to 2 votes. I think a more equitable way of doing it, and a chance to give more experience to the new councillors, in this case Councillor King, is to send one of the new councillors as a delegate while still sending Councillor Glacken as an observer, as she has requested to attend and been approved previously by the Mayor, as I mentioned, and I don't see that anyone therefore is disadvantaged.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. I do have a speaker against, but I've also got a question from Councillor Vandervan.
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, to the member of staff most appropriate to answer, when is it normal for item C to appear on these sorts of motions? Because I think it's the first time I've ever seen that in a motion of this nature.
Mr Zagnich.
Thanks for the question. Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor. That's standard practice, Councillor Vandervan.
Sorry.
Since when has it been standard practice?
Mr Zagnich.
Well, since I've been in the role, and prior to that, I understand, Councillor Vandervan. Happy to provide you all the copies of all the motions where it's occurred or the resolutions of the council.
Just to get a follow-up comment or statement, Madam Deputy Mayor, isn't it a normal process where if we confirm the attendance of the Mayor and Deputy Mayor and determine the 2 other councillors, the rest follows and doesn't need to be articulated in a part of a motion?
Mr Zagnich.
It's for abundant caution, Councillor Vandervan, to ensure that the motion is followed through, notwithstanding the council's policy.
Which council policy might that be?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, it's the council's expenses and facilities policy, Councillor Vandervan.
Any
Times. I agree that Councillor King should go along, but I'd like to
What's your point of
Councillor
order?
Cameron clearly enunciated the 2 councillors that he wanted in the motion, so how you deal with an extra nomination is either by amendment or some other subsequent means.
On the point of order, Madam Mayor, Madam Acting, excuse me, Madam Deputy Mayor, I should say.
Am I allowed to take comments on a point of order? Thanks for your point of order, Councillor Vandervan. I believe we're debating the motion as it currently stands on the screen. Councillor Doxey has not proposed an amendment to that. I believe that if this motion is lost, we'll be able to debate alternative nominations. I do have a question from Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, as the chair, to the most relevant member of staff, I believe. Councillor Cameron said that my nomination, my request to attend the conference would be dealt with, I think you implied separately, as in the Mayor had already agreed that I was able to attend. So therefore this motion that we have before us is not quite correct, because I suppose it doesn't include that I can attend, but it somewhat excludes that I can attend, albeit but not as a voting delegate on behalf of council. So I'm just a little confused because it says that we will have 2 other attendees other than the Mayor and the Deputy
Councillor
Mayor.
Glacken, is it a question or are you proposing an amendment?
No, I'm asking clarification as to whether or not this motion technically would exclude me from attending.
I'll put that to Mr Zagnich.
Thanks for the question through you, Madam Deputy Mayor. So the council's required to resolve who its voting delegates are for the purpose of the 4 voting delegate positions it has at the Local Government New South Wales Conference to vote on motions and board elections. As I understand it, prior to this report being presented, Councillor Glacken requested to attend the Local Government New South Wales Conference, and that was approved by the Mayor, but clearly not as a voting delegate, as an attendee other than a voting delegate. In response to Councillor Glacken's question, for completeness, again, you may wish to include the attendance of Councillor Glacken as an observer, if that's the outcome, in this motion, if you so wish. Noting, though, the report details the fact that Councillor Glacken's attendance as an observer has already been approved by the Mayor previously.
You happy with that, Councillor Glacken? I do have a speaker for Councillor Vanderven.
I wish to move an amendment to the motion, Madam Deputy Mayor, to amend item B to say determine the 2 other councillors to attend the conference as councillors voting delegates for voting on conference motion and board elections, and then to have a separate election should that be required, because we appear to have 3 councillors wishing to go to this conference and we would probably need to have an election. So I'm asking the mover and the seconder if they want to drop the names of the councillors and then have a separate election later.
Councillor Cameron was the mover.
Well, in terms of an amendment, I don't accept the amendment, and I'd go further and say that is not the method by which we determine each year our representation at local government conference. Each year, we determine our representation for voting delegates by way of a motion. We don't say that we're going to send 2 and then pull them out of a hat or have a show of hands or have a separate election. The motion articulates who will be our voting delegates, and that's what I've put forward, and that's how I wish to keep it. But if you can get a seconder, I guess we'll have a vote on your amendment in the normal fashion.
All right. Amendment's not been accepted. Is there a seconder for the amendment? Yes. Okay. Councillor Glacken seconded the amendment. Does Councillor Vanderven speak for the amendment now?
If I can request clarification from the mover of the amendment.
Sure. I believe Councillor Vanderven's now entitled to speak for his amendment.
Yeah, I'm happy to, Madam Deputy Mayor, on the basis that in past years, I think, and with any other voting sort of opportunities, it's normal to decide that we're going to confirm that the Mayor and Deputy Mayor and determine the 2 other councillors, and that was the original motion in the board here. So once we pass this particular motion to determine the 2 other councillors, at the end of when that gets through, at the end of it, we then seek nominations to go, and it's normally at that stage where we decide who those extra attendees are. They've never, in my knowledge, in 13 years, been part of the motion to say the way that it's worded in this particular instance. And we usually just have a bit of discussion around who would like to go, and you know, at that stage, if there's more than 2 people that express an interest to be voting delegates, it's usually at that stage that we have an election or a vote about who is actually the voting delegate. So I see this as a totally different motion to what we've done in the past, because it's usually as per the original recommendation in our paperwork, and this is totally different to that because it's actually nominating the 2 councillors.
Thank you. I have a speaker against the amendment. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. The first point I'd make is that my original motion, is completely in order. The second thing is that I question, and I have a slight disagreement with Councillor Vanderven, and my memory may well be faulty. I'm not perfect and I do make mistakes, but I recall 2 years ago when the conference was held in Rosehill in 2015, and it was a voting year. It was a year when election was on, And when Councillor Glacken ran and was successfully elected on the Liberal Party ticket at that time, at that conference, and that was. I apologise. I withdraw and apologise for that.
Semantics.
No, well, you're quite entitled to point that out. And as I said, I'm not perfect. I do make mistakes. However, in that year, there was some disagreement about who should be the delegates. And Councillor Gluckham was unsuccessful in that year in being nominated as a voting delegate, but it was found to be completely in order, that she attend as an observer, and she did, and was able, correct me once again if I'm wrong, but from that position of being an observer, was able to nominate for the executive. Now, as I said in my outline comments, or in my first set of comments, no one will be disadvantaged by this. The only effect of this will be that potentially one person won't have 2 votes, they'll have 1 vote instead of having 2. So I believe that the report and the recommendation is calling for us to articulate by way in this motion who are the voting delegates. That's what I've done. I've taken additional steps in C to ensure that an attendee or an observer is also covered by the resolution in that their registration, travel, well not their registration, but the travel and accommodation, other reasonable expenses be provided for. And I believe my original motion is both in order and caters for everyone equally and provides everyone with an opportunity to participate that wants to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. I have a speaker for the amendment, Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy. No, Deputy Mayor, Acting Chair. Thank you. I speak for the amendment because it would give an opportunity for any councillor around this table to nominate as an attendee to the conference, as there are limited positions for council delegates, limited by us as a council. We have determined some years ago that we would allow only 4 councillors to attend as delegates for council, and that would be the mayor and the deputy mayor and 2 other voting delegate councillors. And I do acknowledge and thank Councillor Cameron for including, as I've read the wording, approval, registration, travel, etc., for council's delegates, and the clarification by the General Manager that I would be considered as a different conference attendee, and I acknowledge that. However, the motion previously by Councillor Cameron excluded the opportunity for any councillor around this table, any councillor, to say that they wished to attend this conference. And already we've had someone say tonight that they would actually like to attend this conference, another councillor other than the 2 that were named by Councillor Cameron, one of whom was himself. For all we know, there could be more councillors wishing to attend this conference. I think it's important that we get to the point where we determine that we will have conference attendees and they will vote on behalf of council for the conference motions as well as the board elections. But it is important to do so, and then even more important to allow other councillors to nominate. And this motion would allow other councillors, Councillor van der Ven's motion would allow any councillor around this table to nominate to attend the conference. And then we could, by vote, determine if there were indeed more than 2 councillors wishing to attend as council's delegates, we could then vote as to who could attend. And I think it would be much more encompassing to allow this motion to go forward and this amendment to become the motion. So I urge councillors to consider the opportunity that this may allow for other councillors around the table to nominate with an expression of interest to attend. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. I have a speaker against the amendment, Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I was the seconder for Councillor Cameron's original amendment, and I still support it.
Thank you. I have another speaker for the amendment, Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I have listened carefully to the two previous speakers that are for the motion. Councillor Van der Ven spoke convincingly towards this particular motion as it appeared on our documents that we've had for the last week to look at. And the points raised by Councillor Glacken were also strong in as much as it gives other councillors, i.e. myself and perhaps others, an opportunity to put their hand up to attend the local government conference. As I said before, the last time I attended one was in 2014. So I will be supporting this motion. Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. I have no further speakers for or against the amendment, so I'll now put the amendment as it appears on the screen. Oh, sorry. Councillor Van der Ven, would you like to close the debate? I believe that's your point of order.
Thank you. You read my mind, Madam Deputy Mayor. The issue here is around the fact that every year there are voting delegates required. Some years there are voting delegates required for motions and for elections. This particularly happens to be one of those years, but in previous, like even last year, there was voting delegates required because you have to vote on motions. And because of the size of our council, we're entitled to have 4 delegates vote. So I just want to put that to rest, because there was a suggestion from Councillor Cameron that there was a difference from one year to the other. There is, but we still have to have voting delegates every year. From that perspective, I think Councillor Glacken also made some points about how if the amendment is successful, that we can actually have everybody that wishes to nominate for this conference could have an opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van der Ven. My apologies for not allowing you to close. That was unintentional. I will now put the amendment. All those in favour? All those against? That's tied for all. I'll use my casting vote against the amendment. We now return to the original motion. If we could get that back on the screen, please. Okay, we've had one speaker for and one against the original motion. I can't see any further councillors wishing to speak for the motion, so I'll allow Councillor Cameron to close debate on the original motion.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. I just want to address a question that was raised by some speakers, or an issue that was raised by some speakers, about this motion, if it's successful, precluding some people from attending as observers and locking people out, perhaps, or giving the impression that people are locked out tonight. People have had weeks and months to express an interest in attending this. Councillor Glacken did some weeks, if not over a month ago. I'm not sure of the exact date, but certainly far longer than I did. I only did it, I think, last week or the week before. But anybody who wanted to attend the conference was invited to do so and has had ample notice and ample opportunity to express their interest. And no one's being locked out of anything. The voting delegates, it's my contention that the voting delegates are always determined by council, and there have been other years where that has been contested, because there are often more people who want to be voting delegates, the 2 non-mayor and deputy mayor positions, than there are positions for, being 2 positions. So there's nothing abnormal in this. It's in order, and let's hear no more talk, please, of people being locked out from attending as observers. Ample time has been provided for people to express an interest if should they have wanted to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We're now moving on to item 14.2, Albury Entertainment Centre, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. I need a mover, please, councillors. Councillor Van der Ven.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'll move the recommendation as a motion that Council A accept no tender for contract 17/00596 Albury Entertainment Centre, heating, ventilation and air conditioning refurbishment and stage replacement. B, invite fresh tenders for the stage replacement to be carried in the period January to March 2018. And C, postpone the Albury Entertainment Centre heating, ventilation and air conditioning refurbishment to the 2018-19 financial year.
Thank you, Councillor Vandervan. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervan, would you like to speak to that motion?
Just briefly, Madam Deputy Mayor, I think reading the report, obviously it was a bit of a concern to people that came and had a look and seen what was involved with the process to have the complicated issues around two basically different engineering solutions for the one contract for the stage replacement and the HVAC for the entertainment centre. The complications were around the fact of the period of time required for HVAC. Some of this stuff needs to be ordered 3 months in advance, so very difficult to do and keep to that window that's required. As well as that, there would have been some issues around the stage replacement because of the asbestos identified under there, and that would have made that a little bit more complicated than perhaps at first thought. So this is a really sensible motion. Yes, we do have to have the stage replaced, that it can be done in that time frame, that 3-month time frame, and yes, it makes sense to postpone the other one to the following financial year, but they might need to have a larger window to do that. But I'm sure that we'll get some reports from the engineering people about that in due course.
Thank you, Councillor Vandervan. I have no other speakers for or against the motion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. We're now moving to item 14.3, the draft AlburyCity 2016-17 financial statements. I'd like to invite our external auditor, Ms Danielle McKenzie, up to the podium in case councillors have any questions on this particular item. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, through you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'll just find... I can use the one on the board. I'll move the recommendation that Council A, B and C receive and note the general purpose financial statements, special purpose financial statements and special schedules for the year ended 30 June 2017. Note the draft auditor's reports, including the report on the conduct of the audit and the independent audit reports for the year ended 30 June 2017, and authorise the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor and the General Manager, Council as responsible accounting officer, to sign the statement by councillors and management included in the general purpose financial statements and special purpose financial statements in accordance with the Local Government Act 1993 and the Local Government Code of Accounting Practice and Financial Reporting.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, would you like to speak to this motion?
Yes, and I really need to try and find the relevant sections. But in summary, if I can't find it, I'll paraphrase it, that there was no areas that were of significance raised within the financial reports that were deemed of noteworthy by the auditor. In fact, I think I might have it here. So just to confirm, that the auditor is not aware of any matter that would prevent the required statements by councillors, etc., to be agreed. The accounts and the staff were thanked for the work by the auditor as well. The accounts were very clean. I think they used the terminology in the audit committee. And there was one area that was discussed, and that was with reference to the Rural Fire Service and the way in which that's accounted for. In the actual audit committee itself, there was some discussion around the determination for not the accrual, the determination of infrastructure and how we account for the life expectancy of that infrastructure. But other than that, there was nothing of significance within the audit committee itself, noting, of course, as I have already raised, that the auditors said that the reports were very good and there was nothing to raise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Remarkably, we have no question. There we go. Councillor Vanderven.
Well, I don't have a question for the auditor. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I've got a question to maybe Mr. Finlayson or the General Manager through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, and it's around the infrastructure performance indicators which Councillor Glacken alluded to, and they're all trending in the wrong directions, although this does say that AlburyCity's result is in line with its Fit for the Future projections. Can I ask if at some stage in the not too distant future that a report be presented to the Finance and Administration Committee to see what our projections are for these ratios, the infrastructure renewals ratio, the infrastructure backlog ratio and the asset maintenance ratio over the next 3 or 4 years as far as our long-term financial plan is concerned?
Thanks. I'll put that to Mr. Zagnich.
Thanks for the question through you, Madam Deputy Mayor. We're certainly able to provide that report, Councillor Vanderven. Mr. Finlayson might just give us a snapshot of that situation, if you like, at this point in time.
Thank you, Mr. Finlayson.
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, based on our adopted 4-year delivery program, for example, it's projected that our infrastructure renewal ratio will be slightly less than depreciation expense. However, from a condition perspective, it's our thought that our projected expenditure is adequate given the condition and stage in the life cycle our assets are at. The infrastructure renewal requirements and infrastructure backlog will be further assessed as part of the update of asset management plans. And as part of that process, AlburyCity's infrastructure management strategy will also be coming before the council in the future for consideration.
Deputy Mayor, on the basis of what you just said, I'm assuming that you're suggesting that the one size fits all doesn't apply to AlburyCity, and that perhaps even in the infrastructure renewals ratio that the minimum benchmark perhaps should be a bit lower because of these circumstances that we find ourselves in. Is that the way I read your answer?
I'll put that back to Mr. Finlayson.
Just through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, that is correct. For example, in AlburyCity's Fit for the Future improvement proposal that was submitted to the state government, we outlined that due to the current lifespan of our assets, that AlburyCity is not required to spend the equivalent of depreciation expense. However, that may be the case further in the future, but not right now. So on that basis, AlburyCity was deemed fit for the future.
Any follow-up questions, Councillor Vanderven?
No, thank you. Is it possible to make a comment?
Sure, I'll have to have you as a speaker 4.
Yeah, basically that's what I wanted to do. I don't have any questions. Perhaps if I ask the question, are there any issues that you're aware of that haven't been reported? But I'm not sure whether this is the right forum for that. But I just wish to say, Madam Deputy Mayor, that obviously the results, and they've been well canvassed through the community over the last month or so, are very, very good, and it's in line with a lot of hard work that the council staff have done, and also that the councillors have done to put us in this position. So I would like to congratulate everybody that's had an input into the financial results that really put us in good stead for any future projects that we might wish to undertake for the benefit of this city.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderven. We have no questions for Ms McKenzie. Thank you very much for attending and for your time. And I have no further speakers for or against, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. That brings us to item 14.4. Councillor Stutchbury will be leaving the chamber.
Yes, because we didn't before.
Okay. So Councillor Stutchbury's conflict of interest is that he owns a property which is used for short-term letting. The item to be discussed is the draft submission in response to the New South Wales Government short-term holiday letting options paper. Okay. And let the minutes reflect that Councillor Cameron has also left the chamber at this point. Thank you, councillors. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, through you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'll move the recommendation that Council note the information contained in the report and endorse the draft submission to the New South Wales short-term holiday letting options paper.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, would you like to speak to this motion?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. This is with reference to submission that we will be making to the New South Wales Government. There has been some significant shift in certain areas of the state, not so significantly in the city of Albury and our community. However, there are areas within New South Wales where things have shifted with the short-term holiday stays. A lot of it has a relationship with the internet and people's ability to be able to book online and therefore find accommodation that is in smaller opportunities or smaller offerings more readily than has been previously. With that shift comes different requirements, different emphasis, and in some regards, some difficulties with that short-term letting. It's imperative that conditions and policy and procedures be the same across the state, and this is an opportunity for Council to submit back to the state government our views, which are very important, albeit we don't have that significant effect. They are very important for our community as we continue to grow and develop, and there is a bigger uptake of this sort of accommodation.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. I have another speaker for Councillor Thurley.
Yeah, just very briefly, I commend the staff on this report. And while it might not be a big issue for this city, in many other places this has caused significant issue with owners of rental properties, with neighbours of units and so on. So I think that our submission is important, and I think it's important that Council keep a very close eye on what the final position paper of the government is. You can already see the angst over Uber, Airbnb and all of these things, and we need to be very careful that we're looking after our community, and our submission is a good start to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. I have no further speakers for or against. Councillor Glacken, would you like to close debate? I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Just wait for Councillor Stutchbury to rejoin us. Seems more relevant to do it at the time. Anyway, both Councillor Stutchbury and Councillor Cameron have re-entered the chamber. Can I have a mover for item 14.5, please? Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I move that Council endorse the 5 pledges identified by this report and prepare a formal submission to the City's Power Partnership supporting the pledges.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervan.
Very happy to second that, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, would you like to speak to this motion?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. This has been a good process where the Sustainability Advisory Committee and the community has been involved in this, and it really builds on something this council has been doing now for quite some time with energy, with sustainable transport, and I'm really happy that we've joined up with this Cities Powers partnership. And these 5 pledges, I think, have been selected by talking to our community and talking to various people, and I think that it's a great way to get into this program.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. I have no further speakers for or against. If I might briefly add my comments, I'm very proud that Albury City's gotten this far since we agreed to be a part of the partnership. The staff have worked incredibly hard working through all of the possible options, and I think that the 5 pledges that we've come up with strike the really right balance between showcasing the work that we're already doing in terms of energy savings and also giving us the impetus to work a bit harder in some other areas like sustainable transport, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the results. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Item 15.1, the Evo Cities update. Councillor Vandervan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Much pleasure in moving the recommendation of the motion that Council receive and note the Evo Cities update report.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Very happy to second Councillor Vanderven's motion.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervan, would you like to speak to this motion?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Yes, having been involved with the Evo Cities since day one on council and being a very firm supporter of the project, I think that the results that we see today are ample justification for our continued involvement in this. When you consider the impact that the new residents as a result of the Evo Cities campaign have made to the city in terms of gross domestic product, in terms of houses, in terms of jobs, in terms of bringing skills that to this community, I think it's the single most effective and cost-effective way of us to attract residents to this area that we could have ever imagined. If we go and do some numbers around what our cost has been over the last 7 or 8 years, I think you'll find that with the extra residents that we've gained through this program, that they will more than repay that investment over a period of time with their contribution to our community, not only in terms of physical presence, having a house and paying rates, but in terms of the different people that have come here and putting their personalities and their skills into the community. So what more can I say? As I've indicated, this is the best program that we could have ever signed up to. And again, congratulations to Ms Squire. She's been very much a driving force for this project right through a couple of different general managers, if I might say. And I think she has every right to be proud of the achievements that this is making for our community and continues to make with the right investments by the fellow councillors and by state and federal governments. Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vandervan. I have no further speakers for or against this item. Only very briefly before putting the motion, I'd like to also congratulate Councillor Mack in his absence, who's the current chair of the Evo Cities Steering Committee, and is obviously doing excellent work in that space. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Item 15.2, investment balances. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'll like to move the recommendation that Council receive and note the investment balances report for the month of September 2017.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, would you like to speak to that?
No, thank you.
I have no speakers for or against, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Item 15.3, please, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I move that Council receive and note the report concerning the 2016-17 disclosure of returns by councillors, audit committee members and designated persons.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you. I'm happy to second the recommendation, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, would you like to speak to that motion at all?
Only to note that all the gory details are in that book sitting on the table in the centre of the room.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. I have no other speakers for or against, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That is carried. Item 15.4, corporate health indicators. Please, councillors. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. To move that Council receive and note the June 2017 Corporate Health Indicators Report.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second the motion, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, would you like to speak to that motion at all?
Thank you.
Thank you. I have no speakers on this item, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That is carried. We're up to item 16, delegates' reports for noting. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I move that Council receive and note the report from Councillor Graham Doxey, OAM, JP, on his attendance at the 2017 New South Wales Local Government Aboriginal Network Conference, which was held in Albury from Wednesday the 13th of September to Friday the 15th of September 2017.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, would you like to speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just very briefly, thank you to Councillor Doxey for his attendance and thank you for his detailed report.
I have a speaker for the report. Thank you, Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. My apologies not keeping up with that one because I should have moved the motion, so I do tend to stand in the corner for 10 minutes after. But it was a pleasure to actually attend the conference, and I think AlburyCity, and as a recent report by Mr Jenkins has come out, and I was talking to the Aboriginal liaison officer of the police on Saturday night, but she hasn't seen a report of that yet, and I'd like to see that she gets a copy because she was also instrumental with council staff in relation to that conference. It was very nice to see that John Murray got that for us, as the report had said, and I note your attendance on day 2. And it was good networking across the state, mainly with the councils that send representatives. So AlburyCity did very well out of that. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a question from Councillor Vanderman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just to both either yourself or Councillor Doxey, one of the, and I'll get to the question, I just want to preamble just a smidgen. One of the biggest disappointments from my perspective over the last, 8 or 10 years since the Wagira Trail's been in operation has been our significant unsuccess in attracting outside funding for this particular project, the Wagira Trail in particular, the only exception being the playground at Oddys Creek. I was just wondering whether there was an opportunity to talk to anybody or a number of people at this conference in relation to who we might try next to try and get some interest in outside funding for this especially significant project that we have and have been supporting for a number of years.
Thank you, Councillor Vandervan. I might put that question to Graham Doxey, who attended all 3 days of the conference, if he's happy to take the question.
Just remind me of the key of the question again, please. The thrust of the question.
It was regarding funding opportunities for the Wagira Trail.
Talk to anyone about what sources we might tap into to try and get funding for the Wagira Trail, outside funding.
I might think that's a question for staff.
I'll put it to Mr Zagnich.
Thank you. Sorry. Mr Jenkins, can you give us an update on the current funding strategy and the more recent history around both federal and state funding initiatives along?
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, in answer to the question, there has been a range of funding sourced over a period of time in addition to just the playground that was built at Oddys Creek Park. none directly for support of the Wagira team in developing the Wagira project. However, the boat ramp, which people remember at the end of Creamer Street, fish stations, we've just been successful in getting $100,000 for fencing and revegetation around Wonga wetlands, where the trail is intended to be taken next financial year. And it's also been the trail which council is funding around Wonga wetlands is being used as an offset for the Riverside Precinct grant that we're currently seeking and being shortlisted for. So there's been a range of funding sources, but in recent times, to answer the question in terms of the strategy at the moment, we recently undertook a tour in the last 3 weeks with a minister whose name escapes me and a local member for Indi at a federal level. We're in the process of writing to the minister at the department's request to them to come and inspect the trail and the achievements we've achieved down there. So we're in the process of re-engaging with the Prime Minister and Cabinet's office in relation to that. In relation to state funding, there's no particular funding that we're aware of that particularly relates to the Wagira Trail itself. But once again, as of today, I was looking at a heritage grant that could be applicable to some work that we'll do at Mungabarina Reserve in relation to the trail and some enhancements to that reserve, where the employment of an all-Aboriginal work team tends to push us to the top of the list in terms of funding. I suppose one of the things that in the discussions that I had around the conference that was here, the Wagira project is still unique in local government circles in terms of what's happening, and although there's a lot of interest in other local governments in doing something similar, there's no direct funding opportunities that we're particularly aware of at this point in time.
Thank you, Mr Jenkins. Any follow-up questions? Councillor Stutchbury, would you like to close the debate on that item?
No, thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I'll now put the motion. Anyone? All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. There's another report from the same conference. Councillor Vanderman.
I'll move recommendation and motion that Council receive and note the report from Councillor Amanda Conn on her attendance at Day 2 of the New South Wales Local Government Aboriginal Network Conference, which was held in Albury for Wednesday 13 September to Friday 15 September 2017.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Vanderman, would you like to speak to that motion?
No, I think you should.
Thank you. There are no other speakers. I'm happy to provide my own comments. Thank you, Councillor Vanderman. I was only able to attend one day of the conference due to some prior commitments, but it was a really fantastic experience. I really learned a lot. I met some wonderful people who are doing excellent work across New South Wales. And I also received some fantastic feedback from other attendees of the conference for our staff, which I'd like to pass on, in particular the Wagira team. The conference attendees were actually able to go down and see the trail, which they particularly enjoyed. Also to our events staff, AlburyCity actually hosted the conference at the Albury Entertainment Centre, and there was lots of positive feedback about the organisation of the conference. And finally to Sam Kirby, our Aboriginal Liaison Officer, who did excellent work, including the hand-carved trophies that were awarded at the final conference dinner. I was particularly impressed by those. There are no further speakers. I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you. Item 16.3, Murray-Darling Association. Councillor Thurley.
This time, I move that Council receive and note my report on my attendance at the Murray-Darling Association 73rd Conference in Rinmark from 11th to 13th of October.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Vanderman.
Happy to second that, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, would you like to speak to that report?
Just very briefly, basically, technically, it was a very good conference with a number of good presentations, but I think the most important thing from my point of view and the Murray-Darling Association point of view is that we've been constantly pushing for local government to have a voice in decision-making about the Basin Plan, and prior to the conference, the board of the MDA met and resolved to nominate me as a member of the Basin Community Committee. Applications close next Friday. But what is just as important is that the Murray-Darling Basin Authority have invited me to be a guest member of that committee until the new committee sits in June next year. So my first meeting will be tomorrow. I have a 5 a.m. start from Albury to go to the meeting in Canberra of the Basin Community Committee. It's an important issue because local government really does not have a formal voice in any matters relating to the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, and that's been a source of some significant concern, and it's, I think, a recognition by the MDBA that MDA has a strong voice, represents almost 100 councils of the 167 in the basin, and so we've been invited to be a guest until the new committee meets, and hopefully we'll be a full member of that committee by next year. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley, and congratulations on your accomplishments in that space. I do have a couple of questions from Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you to Councillor Thurley. Councillor Thurley, on the first page of the document, it talks about the CARP, and I've been to a presentation recently where someone else was talking about the CARP and the work they're trying to do to decrease the number of CARP. And you talk in here about daughterless carp, and you also talk about a virus specific to the species, and I'm not sure if they're the same, having noted that you said that they're pursuing a multifaceted approach. So are they the same thing, or are they two different things? Thank you.
I'll put that to Councillor Thurley.
They are two different things. Basically, I'll just a little bit of preamble. The carp control strategy is 3 years before any final decision will be made. It's a huge issue. I can quote one statistic. In a recent flood event, after the floodwaters receded, they counted 10 tonnes of carp per hectare, dead carp. Carp is a massive problem in the Murray and the Darling and all of the inland rivers. So eliminating them in one go will be a huge issue. So first of all, the strategy is about how do we do this safely and will we even do it? So the first thing is the virus is specific to carp, but they have still not totally accepted that, and they are testing and testing and testing to see if there are any other native fish that are susceptible to this virus. The second part, daughterless carp, is about genetic modification of carp so that all carp produce daughters and no male carp, so that in that sense they would die out. There would be no one to fertilise the carp eggs. It's seen to be a second string, so that you introduce the virus, you'll probably get, let's say, 85% of the carp will be killed by the virus. There'll still be carp left. And genetic modification of those carp to make them produce daughterless carp will slowly reduce the numbers over time. And you'll always have a percentage of the population that won't succumb to either, but it's a multi-pronged approach to solving this problem.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Glacken, you happy with that response?
Can I have a follow-up, please? Sorry, I've got my question button on. Thank you. Through you to Councillor Thurley. I understand that they're two different things then, but what is the virus?
Councillor Thurley.
Off the top of my head, I can't give you the name of the virus. It is a herpes virus that is similar to any other herpes virus, but not the same, and it targets carp.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have another question from Councillor Vanderman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, to Councillor Thurley. Just a comment first, obviously, congratulations on your continuing role with this organisation. But I noticed in your report that you were mentioning the effectiveness of the barrages, but is there some thought that the barrages, the way they're open and closed at the moment, could do with a modernisation and overhaul to make it more timely, because I believe at the moment it takes something like a number of hours to close and open the barrages.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
There was a panel session held about the role of the barrages, and it was very useful. I think the consensus then was they are necessary to protect not only the lower lakes but the lower reaches of the river. But yes, there is an acknowledgement that manual opening and closing of the barrages is a thing of the past, long, long ago, men having to go out there and turn major screws to lift and lower huge concrete objects. So there is some consideration being given to some automation that can be done telemetrically and so on.
Happy with that response? Thanks, Councillor Thorley. I have no further speakers on this item, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Notice of urgent business. I actually have one. Yesterday, I attended an event by the Asbestos Awareness Organisation that was held in the Bunnings car park. It was a fantastic event. They talk about 3 waves of mesothelioma that have been caused by asbestos. One was the miners. The second one was tradies and people who worked in industry building houses. And the third wave is the DIYers. It's people who watch reality television shows and think that they can make a bathroom themselves. So the work that this organisation is doing in raising community awareness of how to do these things safely is hugely important. They were extremely well received yesterday at Bunnings, and I have a certificate of appreciation to present to Council, thanking us for our support of their work and for the staff supporting Asbestos Awareness Month 2017. Is there any other urgent business? Thank you, councillors. We now move on to confidential matters. There are 2. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. I'd like to move. Where am I? Here we go. Have we got the wording up there, or do I use this? I'd like to move that we go into confidential to deal with a confidential item, exclusive press and public, on the grounds that the matter relates to information that would, if disclosed, confer a commercial advantage on a person or with whom the council is conducting or proposes to conduct business, and also that the second item relates to personnel matters concerning particular individuals other than councillors and the personal hardship of any resident or ratepayer.
Thank you. Councillor Vandervan.
I'm happy to second that motion, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any statements or submissions from the public regarding the reasons as identified for this confidential item 18.1 and 18.2?
Probably not.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you. Doors are already closed. Right.
This is operator digit control.
You're waiting with great anticipation to hear me read this motion, aren't you?
No, he's going to. That's right. That's good.
Can you make that figure?
I'll go to the other one first.
I can't read that from here. No, that's the short one, because you amended the wording. It's not the same as... The old motion anyway.
On your behalf,
It's the old motion at the moment. Councillor Guck and Councillor Thurley moved an alternate motion. We need Councillor
correct.
Thurley's
Yes,
correct
we do.
wording.
I do
Yeah.
apologise.
Otherwise, I could read it off my sheet. First one, please, Alex. This is the second one. Can I get the first one? Thank you. I'd like to advise the meeting of the resolutions as adopted in confidential. Firstly, item 18.1, that the council decline the licence application for the temporary commercial use of a limited area of public land, part lot 2, DP 1225156, within the proposed Riverside precinct. Secondly, item 18.2, that council receive and note this report, advocate to the New South Wales Government that the Local Government Act 1993 be amended to enable councils to apply to the court to take possession of properties for the purpose of sale to recover outstanding rates and charges that have been payable for more than 5 years. C, resolves to sell the following properties in accordance with its powers under the Local Government Act 1993 for unpaid rates and charges. A, Lot 11, Deposit Plan 18969. B, Lot 4, Deposit Plan 218342. C, Lot 264, Deposit Plan 738018. And D, Lot 76, Deposit Plan 39384. D, authorise the General Manager to A, appoint a real estate agent by such method that the General Manager deems necessary. B, instruct council solicitors to prepare a contract for sale for each property. C, determine whether any arrangement other than full payment of the outstanding rates or charges will be sufficient to cancel the scheduled public auction. D, fix the date, time and location of the public auction. E, determine the reserve price for each property. And F, execute the contract for each property in the event of a sale. Part E, that council authorises its seal to be affixed to the contract for each property in the event of a sale in the presence of two signatories authorised to affix the seal pursuant to Regulation 400 of the Local Government General Regulation 2005 and the use of council seal policy. Thank you. That was carried. There being no further business, I'll close the meeting at 7:27 p.m. Thank you, councillors.